Let me show you my hybrid studio setup. Hi folks, Melvin here from Optoproductions.com. And today I want to show you how to warm up your software synths with outboard processing. This video is not about showing off expensive gear, because most of the gear I own is actually second-hand, or I built it myself, like from DIY kits. I mainly want to talk about my workflow, gain staging, routing everything, and my overall process. So, let's get started. Alright, so I've got Drumazon 2 here, which is an updated version of the classic 909 drum machine. And I want to warm it up a little. The first thing I need to do is to create individual outputs. You can do this by going to the routing options in the top left of the window. Oh, and before I do that, let me just change the quality to ultra. So go to options, audio outputs, edit setup. And here you can see all the outputs. But now in Cubase, I can activate all the outputs right here in the VST panel. And now I can unfold the track and everything should match up. And I can also rename everything. In Cubase, output 1 is usually assigned to the master output. So I'll start the bass drum on 2, the snare on 3, and so on. And for some reason, output number 10 doesn't work. I'm not sure why this is, maybe it's a bug, but I'll just skip it. And I'm gonna combine the closed hi-hat and the open hi-hat on one channel. Okay, that works. So let me just create a quick pattern. Okay, I'll copy this pattern over to pattern 2 and then I'm gonna activate host mode and draw in some MIDI notes. So C0 and C sharp 0. And I'll add some more variations. And now all I need to do is go to the mixer. And here I can select all the outputs by holding down Shift. And then when I hold down Control Shift and set the first output, then the rest will follow consecutively. I'm using a RME Digiphase, which has 32 channels of ADAT inputs and outputs. I'm using 3 different converters, the Ferrofish Pulse on the first 16 channels, then a Focusrite Octopre Mark II Dynamic, and a Behringer ADA 8200 for the last 8 channels. They all have a slightly different sound, but the Ferrofish is probably the cleanest. So I'll use that for today. Now the outputs from these converters are hooked up to this jack patch bay. It takes up twice the amount of space than a regular TT patch bay, but it costs about 1/20th of the price. Everything is normaled, so without patching anything, these converter outputs go straight to the mixer monitor returns. And this mixer, by the way, is a Soundcraft Ghost 32 channel mixer. I bought it used for like 500 euros or something like that. And of course it's not an SSL, but it has a very low noise floor and lots of routing options. It's actually a quite popular mixer used by house producers like Jody Wisternoff and Interstellar Funk. But now I can EQ these drums on the mixer. And everything is summed to a stereo group track. And this is where the magic happens. The group tracks have inserts connected to the patch bay, so I can easily route this to wherever I want. Right now, I'm sending it to a pair of DIY recording equipment, color modules, which has 3 different colors built in, and these can be blended together to taste. The first one is a tape saturation, with a typical low-end bump. Then I've got a JFET distortion. Which is great for bright vocals or guitars, but a bit too dull for these drums. And finally, I've got a cassette distortion. So emulating an overdriven Porta Studio mixer. And this one is really intense, so I usually leave it on its lowest setting. Then I've got an SSL EQ by Link Audio Design. I'll put links in the description to everything here. And these are pretty affordable actually, and with a ton of headroom compared to the plugin version. And this API Lunchbox rack is from Capi in Nashville, so Classic Audio Products Inc. And these are great value for the money and dead quiet. Right, after that I'm using a GSSL bus compressor, and this was a DIY kit by Gustav Kohli. He doesn't sell them anymore, but you can get a very good kit from DIY recording equipment. So those are the inserts. I've also got a couple of sends. This mixer has 6 mono and 2 stereo aux sends, which is a lot. Everything is routed through the patch bay, so I can add whatever I want to use. First of all, a reverb. An Alesis Quadreverb 2. It's a multi-effects unit actually, but I use it mainly for room and hall reverb. Everything I record, so all the drums or drum computers I have in this room, I usually record with a little bit of reverb on it, just like you would get on an acoustic recording. I think it sounds a bit too dead without reverb. In addition to reverb, I've got a Roland STE 1000, and this is a digital delay. It's mono, but it sounds great. There's even an option to lower the sample rate, which makes it really lo-fi. It has an LFO, modulating the delay time for chorus and flanger effects. And you can store 4 different presets. So if you can find one on the used marketplace, definitely get it. At the bottom of this rack is an 1176 clone, but it's stereo. It can sound clean or crunchy depending on how hard you drive it. But in this case I'm just using one channel right now. And this is again returned via the patch bay to a spare mixer channel. Finally, I've got a Boss BD2 Blues Driver distortion pedal sitting on the ground here. And it has an included tone control, which is really useful. And this is also connected to an aux channel of the mixer. I'm not even using a DI box or reamp here. It's connected straight to the mixer. So that may or may not work in your situation. It depends on the pedal you're using. Play around with the gain, as this can really change the sound. In this case, I'll set the gain to 12 o'clock, which should be plenty. After that, I'm taking the group outputs and I'm patching that straight to my Rayvox A77 tape recorder. I recently restored and recalibrated it, and it actually has 3 heads, so you can monitor during recording. And that means I save a lot of time because I don't have to rewind every time, which is great. Let's listen to the difference for a second. So without tape, and with. It's pretty similar, right? It's amazing how well the high end is retained. But of course, the fun starts when you drive the input some more. One thing that's important when you're working with output gear is to check your levels. So in Cubase we've got a test generator, and I usually start by matching the input and output gain. One thing you can also do, and this is useful if you don't have a 32-channel mixer, and that is to combine software and hardware. So with Drummerson I can use the internal effects, for example, and if I go to the audio setup, I can select an output for the bus outputs. So we've got two buses, bus 1 and bus 2, and I want to apply some effects to the kick. So I select the same channel as the kick here, output 1. And now I can add some distortion, for example. And this all goes through the same channel on my mixer. So I can EQ the kick and the distortion, and I do the same with the open and closed hi-hats. Yeah, that's basically it for the hardware setup. I usually work destructively, meaning I won't save my settings, as that's usually too much work, and I change everything all the time, so I always forget to do that anyway. I do save the MIDI pattern though, as that may be useful later on. If I want to, I could record the individual outputs of the mixer as well, but in that case you would miss the action happening on the group track, so it wouldn't sound the same. Listen to how the kick drum length affects the hi-hat sound and the groove. So what I usually do is I record a few bars with all the drums. Then I'll record one without kick. And then one without clap or snare. And finally I might solo some of the different sounds, so I can still cut out individual samples when I want to. Because then I still get the delays and the reverbs and the compression and stuff like that. And sometimes I even record variations with different effect settings. A driven one. Or one with more reverb or delay. Or I may play around with the panning. And if you do that, just make sure to leave out enough space before and after, so you can cut out a clean loop afterwards. Although it can be fun to record real-time tweaks as well. Especially the kick drum length has a huge impact on the sound, because it interacts with the compressors and the hi-hats. And I think many people forget this when you're working in the box, as we're so inclined to separate everything, but the magic is in the bus processing. And sometimes you even get happy little accidents. So, what's the point of recording these samples? Well, obviously I'm giving an example here, but I basically have the same workflow when I'm recording synthesizers or drum computers or even vocals. I record everything with effects, and that means that when the time comes to mix everything, it already sounds great from the start. And of course you can't get rid of these effects after the fact, but it actually helps me to work way faster. Once it's recorded, I just need to deal with it. And in the box you sometimes have so many options, it's difficult to actually get the work done. Another benefit, and this is how Noisia used to work, is that I record everything. Not only drum loops, but also synth parts or bass lines. And these are great song starters. And of course I get the sound of the studio wherever I am. And I know these samples are unique to me. Nobody has access to them. Alright, I hope this video gave you some inspiration to start your own hybrid setup. Start out small with a guitar pedal or some outboard effects and build from there. I've noticed that the more I start applying processing during the recording phase, the less mixing I need to do, because it sounds great from the start. The only problem is that you really need to think about what you want to record and how it ends up in the final mix. But in the end, this will speed up your process immensely, because you can't tweak things after the fact. You have to work with what you've got. Okay, cool. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll put some relevant articles down below in the description. Subscribe to this channel if you found this video helpful, and I'll see you next week with another tutorial.